Madhura Chakrabarti is the head of people analytics at Syngenta. Madhura, I will pass over to you. As you listen to Madhura, if you have any questions for her, please add those to the chat and I'll ask those at the end. Madhura, over to you.
Thank you, David, and thank you for having me here. I'm Madhura Chakrabarti. I lead the People Insights and Analytics team at Syngenta, based out of Basel, Switzerland. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. For those of you who are not aware of what Syngenta Group does, we are a crop protection company. We produce seeds, herbicides, fungicides, and as we like to say, we feed the world. So with that, I am going to try to move the slides and let's hope that's working. Maybe not. Okay, so what I always like to start with when I talk about HR upskilling in analytics is this study that was done by Burson Deloitte back in 2017. And what they essentially found was, as you look at organizations that are high in analytics maturity overall, so I'm looking at the x-axis here, the people analytics teams in those organizations also are increasingly more matured. So if you look at the light blue dotted line at the top, you can see the linear progression that the maturity of the people analytics teams also increase. But what's even more interesting is if you look at the dark blue line, and that's the analytics maturity of the HR function. And as the analytics maturity of the entire organization goes up, the analytics maturity of the HR function exponentially goes up as well. If you look at the very end of the curve, so you go from 34% to 63%. And what that really means, this entire graph, is the maturity of the people analytics function is not enough to drive a data-driven culture or to have an analytics-driven culture in the organization. We have to bring HR along in the journey, and we cannot leave HR behind. And that is the crux of the presentation. That's the crux of all the initiatives we are putting in place at Syngenta, and because we really aspire to have a data-driven HR function in the company. So having said that, where we began in the journey back in 2019, where the vision was, let's put something together, let's put some initiatives in place in order to upskill HR in the organization. And if I look back, our efforts were pretty ad hoc in that year. And in hindsight, we could categorize them into some unstructured activities. For example, from time to time, we would have a challenge in Yammer, which is our social platform within the organization. We would put out a challenge there saying, if I want a headcount number broken down by 3 countries and the top 3 work levels, which talent dashboard would I use? And the winner gets just a shout out in the Yammer channel, and we would carry on these activities from time to time. We would also look at some of the internal events, and anytime people analytics got some airtime, we would have some pop quiz where we would ask people to take part in an analytics quiz in a Menti poll or something like that. And then we would also have a ton of branding materials that we would use as part of our presentations that we would give to the other teams. Or back then we used to go into the office, so we would put up a lot of charts as to what the team does in and around the area where we sat, so that people walking by could see that. And that just went on to educating people as to what the team does. But like I said, these were very ad hoc activities. We then started introducing some semi-structured activities where some amount of preparation was needed. And one of the examples is the escape room game that, again, kudos to ABN AMRO, who first designed this game in partnership with a third party, where you would put certain people in the room, give them an analytics problem, they have some props, and you would have to crack the code at the end. So we did that with some of our HRBP population. It was successful, but again, one-off activities. And then in the structured category, we had some formal training under this module called Ignite, where we had a hypothesis building course, where we had a data-driven analytical thinking course, and some agile thinking as well. And all HR employees were were asked to go through that training. So some bit of structured training there. And then finally, we were working on identifying the key capabilities that HR needs to upskill in at Syngenta for the next 2 to 3 years. And that really took off and formed the foundation of the data fluency work we then did in the next couple of years. So the 6 capabilities that we identified as an organization for HR are, being agile, customer centricity, employee experience, data fluency, which is what I'm going to talk about today, partnering, and technical savviness. And we had 6 leads working on these 6 capabilities and putting together programs or initiatives or learning pathways. And as you can imagine, I was leading the data fluency part of it. And once these 6 capabilities were identified, the next milestone was to understand, how do we put this into practice? How do we bring this to fruition? How do we make it real, in other words? And as I like to start everything with, is a listening exercise, right? Instead of me trying to design everything and pretending like I know everything, the best way is to understand, what do people want and what do people think when they talk about data fluency. And by people, I mean our HR function, who's the target audience at this point. So the 3 questions that I pose to the team is, we should know what our HR function wants to learn, how do they want to learn, and what are other companies doing. Those are the 3 questions we started to work on. And we held some informal, we call them Yam Jam, so Yammer Jam sessions, where we asked these questions. We opened it up to the entire HR function. People could join in a specific hour, and we had multiple sessions. And we asked some questions like, what does data fluency mean? And if you were to think of data fluency, what comes to mind? What exactly would you want to learn? And then what are some of the blockers when it comes to analytics upskilling? So interestingly, there were 3 very clear themes that emerged out of the listening exercise that we did. The first 2 being the most prominent, and the third one, in all transparency, I almost force-fed that. But the first one was people saying, I want to understand data enough to enable seeing trends, gaps, issues from a higher level. I want to derive insights. I want to make decisions. I want to influence others with data. I want to tell stories with data. But I don't want to become a data scientist. So please don't bother me with details, right? So this was very much at the high level, where they want to understand data enough to be able to tell the story and see trends and understand what a number means. The second one was, these were folks with who wanted to understand a little bit more. They do want to get their hands a little dirty, and I keep specifying that. It's just a little dirty, a little bit understanding of data. I want to understand the sources, where to pull from, but I don't want to spend ages on it, is exactly what one of the comments said, and that beautifully summarizes the theme of that category. So they want to be able to know the source and analyze the data in a simple way. They want to learn different techniques to understand data, and acquire some basic skills to read, source, and explore and visualize data. And then the third category, very few, like I said, fell in this category. They wanted in-depth experience. They wanted to learn about machine learning. What are some of the next analytics milestones that HR should be hitting? And these are people who can be used for building the next set of leaders in people analytics in the organization. So those were the 3 personas, so to say, that emerged. So then we did another set of listening exercise around how do people want to learn, right? And this was a generic exercise. It's not specific to people analytics. When it comes to learning, and when it comes to learning about the 6 capabilities in HR, how do people want to learn? And some of these, as you can see on the left-hand side, people want to learn through new projects, through actual work, in the flow of work concept, so experiential learning. People also talked about having a strong support system when it comes to learning. So I want good technology. I want a line manager that supports my development and my learning. I want colleagues who can support my learning as well. So strong ecosystem, so to say. The third piece was around community, where people say, I learn the best when I have somebody else to learn with, somebody else to share my knowledge with, somebody else to discuss, and maybe a community that I can go into and talk to like-minded people. And then the fourth category was interesting, where people said, learning, I want to learn so that it makes me fulfilling. I want to learn because it's almost emotional to me. I want to learn by becoming uncomfortable. So there was an emotional component to it. And then on some of the other ones on the right-hand side, as you can see, people emphasize the fact that self-driven learning is important. I don't want my manager or a company to tell me. I want to learn at my own pace, at my own platform that I want, in my own time. It should be business relevant. Some people talked about one-on-one interaction through coaches and instructors, and very few people talked about formal education. So the question we asked was, remember a recent time that you successfully learned something. And that's the response that we were trying to get. And you can see the themes here. So at this point, we knew what people wanted to learn when it came to people analytics or data fluency, and how people wanted to learn. And then what we did was we went out and spoke to 7 different companies who have done this successfully and who were at that point much ahead of us in this people analytics or data fluency journey across the globe, some in Europe, some in North America. And these were some themes that emerged out of all the successful examples that people gave. So make sure that the data the content is available and relevant in a one-stop shop. Make sure it's a user-centric approach. So you need to know who needs it, when they need it, and what do they need. There has to be strong sponsorship from the CHRO. And people also talked about a sense of progress. So you need to be able to complete something in order to go to the next one. So that sense of progress is really important to make these initiatives successful. And the final one is around organizational initiatives. So if we can link it to bigger organizational initiatives, it makes it much more successful. So those were the groundwork that we did before we went and designed something. And I am going to skip some of the sausage making part, as I say. What we then ended up with is in our learning experience platform, which, by the way, was being launched at the same time that this work was being done, so perfect timing. We started building learning pathways, and this is just a screenshot you see from the first learning pathway that we call the information consumer. So remember the first persona that people talked about, that I want to know enough, I want to learn enough that I can derive insights, look at dashboards, know what numbers mean. So for this particular persona, you can see again, it's a bit blurry on the left. We had these certain modules. So we start with why build data fluency in HR, which is a generic introduction. It has a video that I speak about why it's important, what are we doing as a company, what are other companies doing. So just a quick introduction video. Then we have some data-driven problem-solving modules. Then we have HR dashboards, a module on that, and that involves all of our, some quick trainings on all the dashboards that we at Syngenta have in-house. And then we have our 4th module on storytelling with data. The 5th one is community of practice, and then 6th one is around learning more around emerging analytics technologies and methodologies. So again, at a high level, these are the 6 modules. It has many sub-modules underneath. But what's important here is we were very clear that it had to be a mix of activities, right? It could not be all LinkedIn learning modules, as useful as they are, and I really love them, but it had to be a mix of different forums or different formats. So there were some LinkedIn learning modules, there were some in-house trainings. As I said, with our HR dashboards, we had some recorded trainings, we had some PowerPoint education materials, and then we also had people an opportunity where people could sign up for a live training that we have every quarter. And then we also posted some Syngenta case studies on analytics. So problems that we have solved in-house, working with the business, working with our HR stakeholders. We shared some of those as well. And then the community of practice. And that's something I really am proud of what we have done so far. This is this is a module or an event where people can sign up for a community of practice. There's a platform or a channel that exists within the learning platform. And then we also have every month a community of practice meet virtually, where we ask non-HR leaders or even non-Syngenta leaders in the space to come and speak to the community. And that has been growing in the last 8 months that we have launched this. So if we go to the next slide, you can see some excerpts from the community of practice here. So we are now at 102 members in the data fluency community of practice, and quite honestly, it took a life of its own. We started we introduced this community of practice, asked people to join. It is open to just HR right now, and then we started inviting people to these monthly sessions. And from 0 to 102 is quite a success, I would say. But again, we have ways to go. And this has really worked in uplifting the awareness around analytics in HR, the use of data in HR, and understanding how other parts of the organization are doing it. So that general awareness upliftment is a really, a community of practice is a really good way to achieve that. And then finally, the question we are often faced with is, how do you know this is working, right? And in my journey, I will say this is something we are still grappling with. We haven't found a successful way to do it, but we did launch a survey a few months back, trying to understand how are we doing as far as the 6 capabilities are concerned, out of which data fluency was just one. And we launched that for roughly 500 HR colleagues. We had a 47% response rate. 81% of them said that they are aware. 71% of them, they're saying they're doing something to upskill them in at least one of the 6 capabilities. And we asked them, what's the area of most interest? And you can see the pattern there. People had expressed mostly interest in upskilling and employee experience, followed by partnering, agile, data fluency, customer centricity, and then tech savviness. It is the all HR results. We saw some very distinct patterns when we looked at the data through regions. So for example, in LATAM, the interest in data fluency was off the charts. So it panned out quite differently for different regions. And then specifically around data fluency, we are trying to see the number of followers. So we have 129 followers. We have 110 members of a community of practice, 93 follower views, which is the number of people who have viewed at least one of the modules in one of the 2 pathways. So again, we are not there yet where we have all our 500 HR colleagues logging into this capability. But remember, there were 6 of them. So there are competing capabilities. And we have to figure out a way to drive this awareness, drive the followers and participation even more. And that's something we are definitely working on. Finally, lessons learned. Looking back, here are some things that I'm happy to share with people who are embarking on this journey. Is if you can partner with larger upskilling initiatives in the organization, the probability of it taking off or probability of success is higher. And it doesn't have to be other HR capabilities like we had in our case. It could be the enterprise-wide data analytics initiative. So you could put some advertisements around the overall upskilling initiatives that are taking place, saying, if you're interested, if you're in HR, check out these pathways. So it always helps to tie it with some larger initiatives that are already ongoing. The second piece is it's absolutely critical that we listen to employees about their needs before designing learning pathways. I could have said, oh, I know people, I know what they want, and let me design the learning pathways, but I don't think I could have ever come up with the 3 learning distinct personas that came up when we did the listening exercise. The third one is we have to measure success, but you also have to know that certain aspects of these learning journeys or learning pathways will be more successful than others. So for example, the community of practice really took off in our case, whereas some of the other modules, we have had very few clicks or very few views, and we are still trying to find out how we can drive participation in those particular modules, even though we thought they were very interesting. So success can be in certain parts and not the overall learning journey. That's what we are seeing. And then overall, start small, create the pull, and push the boundaries. Even if you start with one learning pathway, that's good enough. And then try to launch another one in the next 6 to 8 months. Don't think that you have to come up with all 3 or beautifully crafted 2 learning pathways right away when you launch. You can always do one and then wait for a few months and start with the other. So with that, I am going to pause, and that's all that I had to share. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. Would love to answer any questions.
Madhura, thanks very much. Fascinating, and again, really highlighting, that people analytics leaders are in the most part taking responsibilities for helping to upskill their HR colleagues in people analytics. Again, on the app, everyone that's listening, please feel free to ask a question. I'm going to start with one, Madhura. Obviously, this is a lot of effort for you and the team. It's important. Don't get me wrong. But it takes time away from some of the work that you're doing in the people analytics team. What I'd be really interested to understand is the benefits that you and the team are getting from doing this work.
An interesting one. I think what we learned the most when we put the first pathway together was, this whole exposure to the learning platform, right? That itself was upskilling for us, or tech upskilling for us, and even the listening exercise was an eye opener for us. I think that was huge learning. So that's pertaining to what we learned while putting this together. But by constantly curating the materials, trying to understand what do we need to include in the pathway, what do we need to take out from the pathway, that forces us to be up to date with what's out there, to be reading the materials, to be reading your blogs, David, to understand what's happening out there. Is there something we need to highlight? Is there something that we need to take away from the pathways, like I said before? So it requires us to be to be updated with the knowledge in the space, and that's how it forces us to learn. Now, do we really have to go through the pathways? I think not really, because we help put them together. So we don't necessarily have to, learn the modules or undertake the modules. Some of the materials are created by us. So not necessarily participate or take the pathways, but definitely in putting together and curating materials, that's a big source of learning for us.
And in terms of upskilling, obviously, you've got a reasonable proportion of your HR colleagues that are going through this upskilling. How is that helping you as a people analytics team in terms of amplifying what you're doing and having more impact within the business?
One of the things we are seeing is there's increased demand for access to the HR dashboards. Now, I can't point out that so-and-so asked for the dashboard because so-and-so looked at the pathway. So there isn't a direct correlation, but we are definitely seeing an increased uptake in the dashboards in terms of concrete numbers. So that's one. And the other is the general awareness around questions people are asking. Recently, the HRBP from our IT organization came and said, we are trying to come up with some initiatives to retain employees, but there are some basic assumptions that we are holding underneath these retention initiatives. But we want to test those assumptions. Can you help us test? So the kind of questions that are coming to us reflects a much higher or relatively higher analytics maturity. So I feel somewhere these pathways are helping create that greater awareness, or at least that greater pull for data.
Good. We've got a couple of questions. So I've got one from Elliot King here, Madhura. So have you started transferring these learnings to the education of wider business leaders, i.e. in sales or operations, on the use of HR data? And if so, what sort of difference have you noticed in educating HR versus the wider business?
We haven't opened it up to the businesses, to be honest. So because this is a very targeted effort around upskilling HR, and we want to stay true to that. So we have had people asking if they can join the community of practice outside of HR, and we have always allowed that. We have never restricted it, but no, we haven't opened it up to the users. But in general, the kind of the answer depends on the kind of company you are, right? So in our organization, because it's an crop science or agronomy company, we have some of the best bioinformatics people in the world, right? And we have some very advanced digital and data science capabilities in the organization because of the kind of work that we have to do. Yeah. So I feel if we were to ever go out of HR, it's at a very different scale or a very different level that we are talking about. People would probably need to understand, how to deal with customer data with trillion data points because you're trying to grow plants in the soil. So I feel the need exists at a different level when it comes to our business leaders in the organization. But quite honestly, we are focusing on HR, and we want to stay very true to that for the time being.
Okay, thanks. But interesting point that, in the community of practice, non-HR professionals are part of that. And certainly that's something that I've seen. I know you've seen before, Madhura, because you've studied this, that if you bring in other analytics professionals, for example, into a community of practice, it's a real good way to accelerate the learning of everyone within that particular community, and also come across common challenges and opportunities as
Absolutely.
well.
Absolutely.
So we got one from Stephen Beckwith and Kim Thunis. Actually, they're quite similar, so I'll ask them both, Madhura, and you can probably answer them both together. So Stephen's is, what areas or modules have you seen less interest in, and why do you think those areas have had less engagement? And Kim's is almost the other way around. You spoke about different learning formats. Which ones are the most popular? So maybe the most popular, the least popular, and why you think you've had less engagement or more engagement?
The format, so to say, videos are always the top ones, right? So if you have a 2-minute video or short ones, especially, they tend to be the more popular ones. In terms of content, something that took us by surprise was we thought the case studies in HR that we have done, the in-house examples, would be something be hungry for, or people would look at it or download it, but somehow we are not seeing that traction. So I'm still sure as to why that's happening, but these are stories from our own Syngenta analytic studies. So they haven't been that popular so far, and maybe we just need to figure out ways to promote that. But keep in mind, these are also long formats, so we haven't been able to break them into bite-sized chunks. So we have either uploaded a full deck of a performance analysis that we did, or a full 20-minute video of a presentation that we did, and maybe it's to do with the length. But those are areas that we thought we will have a lot of success or a lot of hunger for, and we are not seeing that.
Very interesting. Well, again, my job as moderator is make sure we finish and start on time. So I will do that now, Madhura, and say thank you very much. Fascinating learning about the work you're doing at Syngenta to upskill HR. And just to reiterate, really important if you want to create a sustainable capability in people analytics and scale it across the organization. So Madhura, thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Thank you, everyone.